Hi and welcome back to the cottage. Today I'm going to offer some tips delivered from a minimalist perspective on ways to improve your homemaking skills. As a minimalist and a homemaker, I've learned a few things through the years that have allowed me to not only appreciate this calling so much more, but also to improve my skills. Now, as I go through today's list, I want to say that these are things that have helped me personally, but not all of them will be necessarily applicable to you and your situation. And when I talk about improved homemaking, I'm really focusing on ways that have made it more enjoyable, fulfilling, and efficient. Tip number one is to reframe your mindset about homemaking. No matter what you tackle in life, having a healthy and positive attitude towards that task will always allow you to be more successful, as opposed to putting up barriers in your mind that hinder your progress. And homemaking is no different. Sure, there are tasks involved in the process that aren't all that thrilling. I would say that cleaning a toilet definitely does not rank at the top of my list of things I like to do, but it needs to get done. And if you're the one who will be doing it, you might as well try to be as positive as possible. Viewing something as only drudgery is going to make you want to avoid it altogether. One thing that has really helped me in this regard was to begin to think about all these little chores as blessings instead of burdens, recognizing that it is a huge privilege to even have a house to clean or clothes to fold, even a toilet to scrub. These are things that not everyone has. When I'm homemaking, I like to rely on the love that I have for my family and knowing that all of these little tasks are going to be helpful for them in one way or another, and that each of my family members will be blessed by the actions that I take. When homemaking, your sacrifices and time spent are investments into yourself and the people that you love. Another way to change a mindset towards the homemaking process is to view it as one of discovery and almost like a creative outlet. Trying new recipes, finding efficiencies, doing some decorating to add personal touches. There are so many creative things that can be accomplished at home. I know that for me, when I was actively working through the bulk of the decluttering process, it was actually really kind of like a fun game and very refreshing to rid our home of all of the excess and find new different ways to organize and display the things that our family valued and decided to keep. I believe that there has recently been a newfound recognition of how important our home life actually is. The chaos of the world with all of its influences and obstacles can momentarily be forgotten in the comfort of our own private dwellings. There is a peace that can be found at home that genuinely can't be replicated anywhere else. The second tip to improve your homemaking skills is to establish a routine or general flow to the day. There are people who shy away from routines thinking that they will be too rigid or harsh, but the beauty of homemaking is that there's a lot of freedom there to establish what works best for you and your family. This isn't like an office job where you're bound by various timestamps throughout the day, meetings at 9 a.m., a noon lunch break, for example. You're in control of figuring out the specifics. If you tend to be more productive in the early morning hours, you can adjust your schedule to reflect that. Or if you're more of a night person, you can go in that direction. The routines can be more broad and general, or they can be worked out in detail. Some basic routines that have worked really well for my family and some examples to share with you are we make sure that all of the dishes are cleared from the table. At the end of every meal, we bring them into the kitchen. At the end of the day, we have all of the outdoor toys set aside in the garage, all of the bikes and scooters and lawn chairs and things like that. In case we were to have a storm or something like that, we're not going to find ourselves scrambling. And also at the end of the day, I have a pretty good nighttime routine where we just kind of reset the house. I do the dishes, the kids help to get the family room back in order and things like that, the sweeping of the floor, so that when we wake up the next day, the house is looking tidy and pulled together and we can start fresh. Knowing that there is some predictability to the flow of the day helps to reduce anxiety. If we know what to expect and the frequency of when we can expect things, it takes out some of the guesswork and really helps to take overwhelm out of the equation. Tip number 3, don't put off the little things. They will just turn into big things. If you see trash that needs to be thrown away, do it. If you walk by a dish left on the table, bring it to the sink. Instead of throwing dirty clothes on the floor or setting a barely worn, still clean shirt on a chair, put them in the hamper or hang them back up in the closet. There are so many little things that happen throughout the day that take less than a minute, and yet if we put them off, they're just going to pile up and become even more daunting to tackle. I was listening to a podcast recently about how homemakers actually have too much time on their hands, and that makes them more inefficient. And it sounds silly, sounds like that's not the case, but when you think about it, it's totally true, because there are so many modern conveniences that we have as homemakers today, and we know that the thing that we need to get done can get done in just a few minutes. So like washing clothes, you just push a button, loading a dishwasher, you push a button, and these things can just get done. So our brains kind of default to put them off until later, and then we end up spending our time doing silly things like checking social media 25 times a day or some other unnecessary and unimportant venture. It's both a blessing and a curse to be able to create our own schedules as homemakers. We can tailor make our day to run the way that we want it to run. But if we're not diligent and very careful, we can end up squandering away hours at a time just by procrastinating. The fourth way that you can improve your homemaking skills is to focus on less inventory. Of course, it wouldn't be a proper list from this minimalist channel if I didn't mention that homemaking can be made so much easier by having less to manage. Here in America and probably other places throughout the world, we are just buried in the excess. And all of those extra things that we have to manage, they come with a cost. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this one because you know where I stand on this issue, and if you're looking for different ideas on how to achieve this, I have an entire catalog of videos on this channel that can help you do just that. Essentially though, I believe that having less inventory allows a person to improve their homemaking skills by putting them in complete control. The benefit that comes along with knowing what you have and where you have it is huge. And that brings me to tip number 5. Find a home for everything. Imagine the struggle of having to step over piles of things or shift items on the counter just to make space to cook. Maybe that isn't even something you need to imagine. Perhaps it's your current situation and you are tired of it. If it is, just know that homemaking can be made infinitely easier by making sure there's a space for every item in your house to live. Like I said, this tip goes hand in hand with number 4, and honestly, it's more likely than not, if you are struggling with either of these, you will need to probably reduce the inventory before you can do the organizing part. If there are piles, that is an indicator that there isn't a defined area for those things to live, and you need to evaluate if you're going to keep them or if they should just instead be eliminated completely. A bit of motivation as you work through this tip. Imagine how easy life can be if everything had a place. Everybody in the household knew where that place was so they could easily find it themselves and easily put things away themselves. I know before we were organized, my kids and my husband would come to me wondering where anything was. They just wouldn't even bother looking. They'd come to me and ask, and if I didn't know, I'd have to go digging with them. Now, if they ask me, I can tell them exactly where it is, or most of the time they can just go find it themselves because it's in the same place that it always is. This also helps a lot when it comes to leaving the home. We would struggle a lot with missing a shoe or a backpack that was lost in the house somewhere. And now we have our shoes all in the same place every time. I keep my purse in the same place. We have our keys. We know where everything is. Basically, we can get out the door really quickly. And so this is one on this list that is really going to help homemaking a lot because you're not going to be spending all of that extra time searching around for things that you need. Tip number 6 is to batch chores as much as possible. I can't stress enough how much time I'm able to save each week by utilizing just this one tip. My theory about why this works so well is that once you get in a mode of something, it's easier to keep going. Really, the hardest part of most things is just to start in the first place, but once you gain momentum and are in a groove of a particular task, it takes very little extra effort to keep it going. I batch many of my homemaking chores, including cooking meals ahead of time, doing laundry 1 day a week, and even a little cleaning routine for my bathrooms that I just get all of them knocked out in one chunk of time. Not having to shift gears while I'm in a certain mode, whether that is a cooking mode or laundry mode, is really helpful to me and the way that my brain processes things. And I think it has really helped me to improve my homemaking skills by making me much more efficient. I found that in my early years of being a homemaker, when I wasn't batching my chores, I would be trying to do too much and nothing very well, if I'm being honest. I would start cooking a meal and then get distracted by needing to clean something. So I would hop over there and work on that for a while, and then realize that the food on the stove was starting to burn. Being torn from one task to another over and over again made me feel so unfocused and scattered. Now the caveat here is, looking back at tip number 2, depending on the routine and schedule that you've worked out for yourself and your family, batching certain things might not really work. So if you are finding that your schedule allows for you to do a little bit of cleaning, a little bit of cooking, and other household chores on a daily basis, and you enjoy doing it that way, then that is probably a better option for you. And the 7th and final tip on ways that you can improve your homemaking skills, my favorite on this list, is to try and try again. I've often heard homemaking referred to as a merry-go-round, sort of a repeating cycle of sweeping floors, washing dishes, folding clothes, cleaning bathrooms, and some may say it's borderline similar to the definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing again and again, but expecting a different result. But when it comes to homemaking, I think that we are, or maybe at least we should probably be, expecting the same result. It's that predictability that I talked about earlier that allows us to form rhythms and to really hone our crafts as homemakers. If you want to get better at something, you know that failing and trying again is the best way to do that, and homemaking allows us plenty of this type of opportunity. Think of all of the recipes that you can make now without even looking at a recipe card. It surely didn't start out that way for me, and probably not for you either. There were likely plenty of failed attempts before you got it just right. I can tie this tip in full circle, somewhat pun intended, with the first one on this list. Instead of thinking of the merry-go-round life as something bad, too monotonous and boring and mundane, really recognizing that in comparison to the alternate, which would be a roller coaster lifestyle with all of its ups and downs and unpredictability and just various things happening, you are instead able to appreciate life at a bit of a slower pace and are given multiple chances to do the same thing, allowing improvement. And let's face it, as a homemaker, the more you do the same things, the easier it is to move through the day with confidence. That is my list of 7 ways to improve homemaking. Like I said, not all of them will be applicable to you, but if you're struggling and want to improve your skills, want to become more efficient, to enjoy the process a little bit more, I hope that these tips were encouraging to you. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope that you'll stop by the cottage again really soon.